I'm burning all to dust.
Good morning. I'll turn everything on. There we go. That's better. I've turned the mics on. That's we can now hear what's going on. So you're all switched on.
Okay, good morning, folks.
So, yep, 9:30 as I said. So, in the studio this morning, we have Vicky Jones. Do we prefer to be called Vicky or Victoria?
I answer to both. Vicky's fine. I really don't mind.
Well, okay, we'll mix it for you. How's that, Vicky?
That's fine.
Vicky's been a bassist with the NZSO, and its previous iterations, whatever it was called in the past.
I think it was already the NZSO by the time I joined it.
Lovely.
Yes.
Oh, right, because before that...
It was the NZBC Symphony Orchestra.
Right,
Yeah.
it got quite a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's lovely to have you here,
thanks,
Vicky,
Rob.
and thank you very much for coming here today to talk to us.
My pleasure.
Now, our first question, of course, would be, when did you start playing for the NZSO?
Well, I started in their training orchestra in 1978. And I got a job in the big orchestra in 1979.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and that's quite a process, is it? When you have to re-audition?
Oh,
for
absolutely.
That?
Yeah. I mean, the training orchestra was a great thing. It doesn't exist anymore, although they have sort of mentor schemes and things, but they don't have an actual training orchestra like they did in those days.
Yeah.
And that was a really good way of discovering what it was like to be a professional musician and play music every day for a living. The pay wasn't very much, but you got lessons and all that.
Yeah,
so it was a
and
fantastic
the experience
thing.
too.
Yeah.
And the honour.
Yeah.
In fact.
Yeah.
You know, to get that far, it would be, quite an achievement for you. So well done, you.
Thanks. But to get an actual job in the NZSO, of course, you have to audition. And people, these days, they audition from all over the world. But first, they have a local round. So New Zealanders and Australians, because Australians are allowed to live and work in New Zealand, I think. So then if they can't find anybody from New Zealand, they then are able to advertise overseas, I think.
Oh,
eventually.
That's really good then, isn't that? That's a really good, yes, a good thing to do. Yeah.
But in those days, there was just a few of us auditioning, so I was in the right place at the right time, I think. Yeah.
So how many people would be in a full orchestra?
I think the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra is around 90 players. It might even be slightly more. But when you think about it, there are 16 first violins, 14 second violins, 12 violas, 10 cellos, 8 basses, and a kind of standard big symphony orchestra. Yeah, and there are bigger orchestras in the world.
Right.
Yeah. But this one, it started a bit smaller. I think the first concert, I think there were around 65 players in 1946.
Yeah. And is that when it started, 1946?
Yeah, they started rehearsals at the end of 1946. I think it was October, and it was a big, exciting thing, First one in New Zealand, first, full-time professional national orchestra, touring orchestra. And I think there were 59 players at the first rehearsal, and then by the time they had their concert, which was several months later, in early 1947, there were 65 players.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
So, and this was all within New Zealand itself?
Yeah, but I mean, some of them were expats, well, should I say immigrants or, I think there were some English people. There were, whoever they could find, who were of the standard to be professional musicians. Yeah.
Oh.
So ex-armed forces bands, for instance.
Yeah, I read somewhere that they had players who had played, it says... when the orchestra first performed on March 6, 1947, only a few of the musicians had played in other symphony orchestras. The rest were former students, ex-cinema players, or ex-members of the RNZAF band.
Yes.
So, all sorts.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So where would they have trained themselves? Would they have be trained in New Zealand, or would you have to have gone somewhere else?
I suppose a few people would have, but, it was very traditional in those days, and in fact even today people go overseas to study, although you can now have Skype lessons and all sorts, the world is much smaller now. But in those days people would often get scholarships to the Royal College of Music or that sort of thing, and go away to England or Germany or somewhere, and maybe not Germany so much in those days, anyway, and then they would come back if they wanted to come home and audition for the orchestra, that sort of thing.
So was there anywhere in New Zealand of that ilk that they could go to here, or was it just like varsity? Or?
Because it's a bit before my time, I don't really know.
Okay, that's fine.
Vicky hasn't turned her phone on silent.
You're not answering the phone, Vicky.
No, I'm not answering the phone, but I might just try and surreptitiously put it on silent while I'm here.
Okay, so the
except that I can't
process for
find it.
auditioning then would be, in those earlier days, would not be as great as it is today.
Look,
perhaps.
in those days, I'm trying to remember whether we had screens. I think they possibly saw the candidates, but these days you have a first round which is definitely behind a screen, a second round, so they whittle it down because so many people are applying for orchestral jobs, you know. So the second one's, I'm pretty sure that's behind screens as well, and then eventually, when they're maybe down to 2 people, they can request that the screens come down. But, you know, that's so that there's no sexism, racism, any of the other, you know. Yeah.
Oh.
No undue influence.
Absolutely.
No.
I mean, it would be fine if somebody were playing in a wheelchair or, you know, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, women are encouraged not to wear strong perfume and high heels, or were. I think things have changed.
Yes,
They know that.
Okay.
Anyway.
So, when did you first start? Was your first overseas trip with the orchestra?
I was very lucky. I joined the big orchestra sort of towards the end of 1979, and they were already planning for this big trip to the Hong Kong Arts Festival, which was early in, I think it was around February, March in 1980. So I got a fantastic thing. I got a trip to Hong Kong and back, and staying at nice hotels and playing a lot of concerts. I think we did a lot of programs in quite a short time, and it was exhausting.
Yeah.
But the Hong Kong Arts Festival invited the New Zealand Symphony and paid for all the instruments and, you know, the whole shebang. It was
So
a very
your accommodation
expensive.
and everything was
Everything.
paid
Yeah,
for?
it was a
Wow.
fabulous trip. Yeah, but very hard.
Yeah.
But for me, you know, I was a newbie, and it was a big deal. It was exciting. Yeah.
So stepping back, Vicky, what made you choose the bass?
I had played the piano. I started on the piano when I was about 9, which is quite late these days, I suppose, but, you know. And then I started playing the cello at high school when I was 12.
Yeah.
And then I went to university and did a degree in cello playing. I did languages and cello playing were the things I liked doing, so I did that at university. And then it was the sort of mid to late 70s, and I became a rabid feminist. And I used to wear steel cap boots, and I got my truck license and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, this cello is a very sissy little thing, you know. And where are all the women playing the bass? Because there've never been that many women playing the bass. I mean, I know there are loads of them in the world, but in New Zealand, there had been a few in the symphony orchestra, but there'd be sort of one every now and again, you know. But so I just thought, I want to play that big instrument, you know. It was just girls can do anything stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then
Good
I
for
actually
you.
started to really love the sound of the bass. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I changed. And then my cello teacher said to me, "You're just doing that so you'll get a job easier." And actually, he was right. But I mean, that wasn't my
But that wasn't your
motivation.
motive.
But that's what happened.
Right.
Yeah, I got a job pretty quickly.
So when you're playing a bass, are there frets on the...
Oh no!
No.
Good heavens, no!
How on earth do you know where you are?
Ooh.
Or is that a trade secret?
No, it's just muscle memory. You know, you get to know every bass is slightly different size. I think violins and violas and even cellos are much more... actually, violas are also a bit odd. You can get quite small ones and quite big ones. But violins and cellos are generally a very similar string length. You know, the length from what we call the nut, which is right up the top there of the string, to the bridge. Yeah, whereas basses can vary hugely.
Oh, okay.
And so you get used to your bass, you know, and I mean, I can play on somebody else's bass, but it just takes a little while to get settled, you know.
Yeah.
And we have been known to put a few little marks on the side of the fingerboard,
okay.
you know, just... Yeah.
Right.
Just
But not frets, no. We don't need frets.
That's a rude F word, Rob.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I've aspired to the size of a ukulele. I've got frets. So.
Actually, I should be careful what I say because, you know, there are the precursor to the double bass. Well, there were violones that were like big viola da gamba things, and they have frets. Yeah.
Okay.
Most of those have frets.
So in an orchestra then, we've got how many basses would there be?
The New Zealand Symphony Orchestra has around 8 basses.
Oh,
That's sort of the full strength of the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. I think that in the Sydney Symphony there's probably around 9 or 10. A lot of big orchestras have around 9 or 10 sometimes,
Right.
but 8 is big, you know.
So you're all on stage at that one time, all of you.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh well, we'll have 4 tonight and
No,
you know, 4
not
tomorrow.
at all. I think some of the really big orchestras do have a sort of roster system if they've got extra players. But with the New Zealand Symphony, the 8 players play all the big works, which are, you know, all the Brahms, Beethoven, all the big stuff. And generally, if there's a piano concerto or a violin concerto, often they'll drop off. They say we'll drop off a desk, which is 2 players, or 2 desks, or so you might have 4 or 6 players playing in the smaller things. Yeah, and things like the Messiah, I think usually there's maybe 1 or 2 basses. You know, the Handel's Messiah.
Oh, I would imagine there would be more.
No, Baroque music, they generally tend to have much smaller string sections. Yeah.
Okay.
Ah, interesting. Thanks for that, Vicky. I've learned a lot already.
Yeah.
I don't know how useful that information is, but still, yeah.
Well, you never know. I might be on, what's it, The Chase or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we like to get all our answers ready for the chase, don't we? Yeah. We can
Great
answer
programme.
a lot while we're sitting in the chair, but in our chair. But in
exactly.
The chair
You were there on the spot. It's a lot
totally
harder.
different story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we getting to now? We're doing Kirita Kanawa when she became a part of the tours and everything. Of course, in 1974 there was a huge tour, wasn't there?
That was a little bit before my time. That was the Australian one, wasn't
but
it?
it was the Australian one.
That was the first proper overseas tour for the orchestra, actually.
And of course, having Kirita Kanawa in it, and of course Michael Houston. It would have really been a big feather in our cap.
Absolutely, it put the NZSO on the map.
Do you think that's what did it?
And I also think the subsequent tours, you know, we played at the London Proms in 2005, I think it was, and that was the first time the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra had ever played in the Royal Albert Hall, you know, and that was a fabulous thing.
It's amazing.
And we've made a couple of small short trips to Japan. We've done a huge tour of Germany and Switzerland. And where did we go? We went to Germany, Switzerland, Slovenia. I can't quite remember all the places. In 2010. So that was not that many years before I left the orchestra, but that was a huge thing as well.
Yes.
We did a lot of concerts.
And of course, it gives you the opportunity to see such a huge part of the world too.
Absolutely. Although you're not in each place very long.
No.
But I remember after the 2005 tour, we got this deal that we could, you know, we all had a couple of weeks off, and if we paid a little bit extra from what the orchestra had paid, you know, for our fares, we could go to anywhere in Europe for sort of $250 or something. So we just went to Paris for a week or something, and that was fabulous.
Yes. Amazing, isn't it? To be in something like that, Vicky. I'm jealous because you would have got to have seen so many fabulous places too.
I think I was. It's very lucky to have a job in music. I think for you know, to be able to do something you love and get paid for it and get to travel.
Because
and
you're not actually working.
Yeah, well,
you're
actually,
enjoying it
but
so
you are
much.
working too because you've got to practice and you've got to
but it's
keep your
something
standards
you
up.
love.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
All right, I think we should take a
there you
music
go.
break now,
We'll take a music
we are
break.
going to play something with that's bass oriented, isn't it? Would you like to tell us about what you've chosen?
When you asked me to give you some of my favourite music, there are so many things, but what I thought I might do is just have a track from the guy that used to sit next to me in the symphony orchestra. He was the principal bass from, I think, around 2006 to 2012, 13, I think he left. He left a little after me. And his name is Hiroshi Ikematsu, and he is a fabulous bass player. And a lot of people think of the bass as an orchestral instrument or, you know, a jazz instrument or chug-chug on the bottom. But Yeah, he starts off in this track playing a little bit of pizzicato, plucking, and then he plays a beautiful melody. And I just loved sitting next to this guy, and I loved his playing. So yeah, let's listen to a bit of him. He's called Hiroshi Ikematsu, and the song he's playing is called Ave Maria by Caccini.
Oh,
That's the one. That's what it says
beautiful.
here. Yeah.
Jolly good.
Excellent. Let's do it to it. No, I've just got to get myself organised here. As normal, we'll pull that up and those off. Well, that's a surprise to me, Vicky. I've never heard a bass. Well, I have heard it, but I've never recognised that it was a bass.
Yeah,
I didn't
it's an
realise
interesting
it could
sound.
Be a bowed instrument.
It's a
Yeah,
beautiful,
definitely.
beautiful piece of music. Well chosen, Vicky,
Oh,
and thank you
thanks.
very much for bringing it in. I'm sure our listeners were very taken with that.
Well, it gives me a whole new perspective as you as a bass player now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 99% of the time in an orchestra, you're using your bow. Well, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but, you know, 90% of the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that.
Great.
Yeah, much appreciated.
Okay, now, Vicky, I want to know all about this 1990s tour that the NZSO did to Seville. Would you like to tell us all about that?
Well, that was pretty neat. It was, remind me, that was Expo, wasn't it?
Yes,
yeah,
it was an
and Jim
Expo.
Bolger was there.
And
yeah.
the split ends even.
Look, they weren't on that
Oh,
tour.
they weren't on
No,
that
that
one.
was a different thing. Maybe that
Okay.
was a similar kind of year or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we made 2 CDs with split ends, but
Okay.
Enzo, and
Yes.
one of them was great, you know, and then the next one wasn't quite so. Anyway, but no, Seville was neat. One of my highlights was they took us to see a flamenco dancer who had been born in Palmerston North, who grew up in Palmerston North. Then she went to Spain and got married, and she started talking to us. She was an amazing dancer, you know, with the red frilly frocks and everything.
Oh, beautiful. I love it.
Fabulous. And then she started talking, and she forgot that she started talking in Spanish, and she'd forgotten because, you know, she speaks Spanish more than she spoke
All the
English.
time,
And so
yes.
she just kept on talking to us in Spanish, and we gradually glazed over. You know. But Jim Bolger was there, I remember that, the party afterwards and stuff. And actually also the New Zealand Chamber Orchestra, which is players from within the orchestra. We were a little chamber orchestra.
Okay.
We also performed there as well in
Okay.
Seville at big function. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I think that was the one that Sir Ed Hillary was at as well.
Oh,
He was
right.
narrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting trip. Another thing about that I remember is that there was very little accommodation in Seville, and
was going to ask you about
they
that,
put us in this strange set of little prefabs. It was called Villa Henis or something, and it was just horrible. You could hear the person next door taking their vitamins out of the pill bottle. You could, you know, shaking a pill bottle or
The walls
turning
were
their
paper
newspaper over. Yeah,
Oh
in
my
the room
God.
next door. And apparently one of the players, when he got back late and had forgotten his key, he just took the air conditioning unit out and climbed through the hole in the side of his room.
Oh,
Yeah, that was an
grief.
interesting trip. Yeah.
So this was accommodation for the orchestra themselves?
Yeah.
So, oh my God. So no secrets.
No.
Oh my goodness. So where were your venues you played there? What
Look,
were they
I
like?
honestly do not remember much about that trip because it was a long time ago and my memory's not very good. I remember more places like Victoria Hall in Geneva in the trip we did in 2010 and the Musikverein in Vienna. That was a
look,
most wonderful.
Tell us about that.
Oh,
Well,
Vienna's my
just an
favourite
amazing,
place.
amazing hall.
Yes.
And another thing I remember about that trip is that they asked me to tone down my hair colour.
Oh.
And the conductor came up to me before we went on tour and he said, Vicky, I hate to say this, but they're very conservative in Vienna, and would you mind, you know, making your hair a sort of more normal colour for this trip?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was a bit peeved actually, and I
They
ended
are
up.
very straight. They're very strict, aren't they? in Vienna?
Well,
yeah.
who knows?
the
But
rebel
you
in
know, yeah. No, I was a bit annoyed, so I went down to the supermarket and I got
You
sort of
had to.
mid-brown or something. You know, yeah, it wasn't really me.
But the venue you would
But
have
the
played in
venues were amazing.
Yes.
We did great concerts, and the orchestra was really well received. And we played it in all sorts of wonderful halls in Germany, Dusseldorf and Hamburg, and you know, all over the place. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I got to see, I'd studied in Germany for a while, and I got to see my old bass teacher. You know, he came and met me. I think it was in Freiburg was one of the concerts we did, and it was so great to see him again.
Yes,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
wonderful.
And I believe you did have the opportunity to go to New York.
Oh, yeah. When I got in the orchestra in 79, and then about 2 years later, I decided that I needed to do more study, which I think, you've got to keep learning and keep practicing. Especially in my situation, I'd only ever studied the bass in New Zealand. I had a great teacher, but it was still a small country, and so I took a little bit of leave without pay and went to New York for a few months and studied with a wonderful old guy who taught at Juilliard, the Juilliard School.
You were honoured.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky.
Place.
I was a bit older than all the students there, just a few years older, and I wasn't really supposed to be there, but he used to say, just say you have an appointment with Mr. Walter in room 315, because there'd be a guard on the door. These days there's swipe cards and everything, so I used to just sneak in there.
Right.
And he invited me to all the master classes, where the students play to each other, and so I got to play, and, it was... Yeah, as well as having lessons and slipping him some money under the table,
Yeah, because to go to Juilliard,
you got to be young and extremely talented,
Very, very talented. So you were very fortunate.
Yeah, I was lucky with that, and that sort of really revved things up for me. And then I came back to New Zealand and played in the orchestra another few years, and then. By then I knew about the orchestra bursary. The New Zealand Symphony has a fantastic thing where they pay somebody, well, in those days British Airways paid return airfares anywhere in the world, and the orchestra gave you were paid your normal pay while you're away, so you could afford to live.
Yeah.
But you were bonded for 3 years when you got back, but you could go and study for 6 months anywhere in the world. And so I thought, what am I going to do? So I wrote to the old guy in New York, who was getting pretty old by then, and said, where would you go if you could go and study anywhere in the world? And he said, I would go to Wolfgang Gutler in Germany. And he was in Berlin at that stage. He was in the Berlin Philharmonic. And he said, that's where I'd go. So I ended up, firstly, in my 6 months, I spent 2 weeks, I think it was, at the Waterloo Festival in New Jersey on my way. It wasn't exactly on the way, but I went to see David Walter again, who was pretty old by then, but, we... I had a lesson or two from him and got to see him again. Then I went to a music festival in France, in Brittany in France, where the German guy was going to be for 10 days. So I did that. And then I followed him to Berlin. And then he decided to move to Cologne, so he left the Berlin Philharmonic and went to the Cologne Hochschule, which is a big music school in Cologne. Okay. So I kind of followed him there. So I got to do, quite a sort of tour, 4 different places, and had lessons.
And this is all paid for. You didn't have to worry about your
I didn't have to. Well, I paid rent, but it was out of, I was getting paid back home. So I could pay. I had a little garret room.
So you were comfortable enough that you could do this without any worries.
And when I was in Berlin, I had lessons at his house. Then when he moved to Cologne, I had lessons at the Hochschule, which was a bit like when I'd been at Juilliard. I went there and had lessons, and I also, played with the other students. We played in master classes and stuff like that. That was really fantastic. He was an amazing guy, actually. And I paid him for lessons, but then sometimes he and his family would take me out to dinner with the money I'd just paid him. So it was a good deal. It was, and I practiced more than I have ever practiced in my whole life, because he was just wonderful. But I was practicing 5 hours a day, which for me is a hell of a lot, because in New Zealand I never practice 5 hours a day.
Who does?
Well, you'd be surprised. Kids these days,
But you were obviously enjoying it, and you loved his teaching and everything.
Yeah, loved it. It was fabulous. And I got to speak German and stuff. I was pretty homesick for a while, but and then I came back to the orchestra, and it was
Don't
great.
you finish up in the right place at the right time?
Yeah,
I've been pretty lucky. And then promotion came up in the orchestra. So, when you first get a job, usually, when you're young, you usually are a rank and file player, not always, but a section player. And they rotate, so you could be sitting number 8 or number 6 or number 4 or whatever. And then a job came up higher up in the section. And so I re-auditioned, and having been to Germany, that had inspired me to work hard and stuff. So I did get promoted, and eventually I was the sub-principal, which is number 2 bass. Yeah.
Oh, well done,
well
yo.
Which is why I got to sit next to the amazing guy we just heard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, he was number one.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 So,
Wow.
fantastic.
The NZSO plays, I know, we know it in the town hall because we live near Wellington, but they play all over the country, don't they, Vicky? I mean,
Oh, yeah. It's really a touring orchestra. And in fact, in the old days, it had to be trains and boats, you know, ferries and trains and buses and stuff. It was a mission, you know. I remember one old guy when he retired, he said he'd worked out that he'd spent 1/3 of his life on tour.
Wow.
You know, so his family only saw him 2/3 of the time.
Right.
And so that was sort of standard. But these days with air travel, I think the orchestra, they still travel a lot, but it's quicker. You know, you just get to places quicker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
well, air transport helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the instruments, the big instrument, the kettle drums, you know, the timpani and actually the cellos as well and the basses go on a big truck, you know, all the percussion
Oh, okay.
stuff and music stands and all that. So New Zealand Van Lines. Are you allowed to name companies on the radio?
Yes, of course you are.
They've
yes.
been doing the stuff for the orchestra for years.
Yeah.
They're absolutely great.
good on
Yeah.
So when they go by, the likelihood is the whole orchestra is in that truck.
Yeah, well, most of it, yeah.
Everything
We'd be
but the
lost
players.
without it, yeah. So, you know, when there's snow on the desert road and stuff, they sort of have to plan ahead and,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, because you can't really do much without your basses.
Yeah.
Of course not, Vicky.
Of
no.
course not. So also the NZO also do things like for small theatres and also schools and marae.
Oh, yeah, they do
Tell us
all
about
sorts
that.
of outreach stuff. Yeah, they do a lot with, they have a mentor scheme, so they pair up a player in the orchestra with a young, you know, maybe high school student, and
Okay.
that person can get lessons. They have a fellowship scheme, which is something similar. I'm not exactly sure, but if you go nzso.co.nz, it's all on the website,
Yeah.
education.
Good.
They do all those free concerts at Te Papa, you know, and lots of New Zealand stuff and sing-along stuff, all sorts of things. They play that small groups from the orchestra. When the orchestra is on tour,
Yeah.
they go to places like Ryman rest homes or,
Yeah.
you know, well, various
And
rest
hospitals.
homes.
Maybe do
Yeah, look, I'm
hospitals?
not sure. I know they have a person you could call in the NZSO and they'd tell you exactly what
Yeah,
they do.
yeah.
And it's a lot of stuff, you
Yeah,
know, kids'
yeah.
concerts, all
Yeah,
sorts.
it is.
So they
yeah.
give back a lot, don't they? They
Yeah,
give a lot
absolutely.
back
Well,
to
you know, the audiences, do get older because,
As we
they
do.
want to encourage young people to come to orchestras because, you know, I think an orchestra, hearing a live orchestra is a fantastic thing, actually. And often people who think, I hate classical music or, never want to go.
But it's totally
And then they go
different,
along, actually fairly recently, this is with another orchestra because I've been freelancing since I left the orchestra. I was playing with Orchestra Wellington songs of Moana with Te Waka, Cook Island, the drumming group.
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't say Cook Island, I don't know where they're from actually.
Right.
Te Waka.
The islands.
Yeah, sorry, I
That's okay.
should have got that right. But they were fabulous, and I have a friend who teaches kapahaka in Masterton, and we managed to, through the Orchestra Wellington, to get a bus of people from Masterton to go to that concert, and
Right.
they loved it. They
Wow.
really loved it. So,
That would have been a fantastic sound.
yeah. I think all of that sort of thing is great. Just trying to get people to come and hear an orchestra and realise that actually it's a pretty neat thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's quite fulfilling. Well, I find so anyway. It's very, very special. Yeah, so we might get down to what you're actually doing now, Vicky, where you are kind of like semi-retired, etc. But now you're into a lot of other things too, aren't you?
Yeah.
You do a lot for the community. I do know that.
Oh, thanks, Val.
You do.
I retired. Well, I shouldn't say retired. I left the orchestra after 34 years in 2012 because my husband's a little older and he'd retired the previous year. And we used to commute from Martinborough which is a long way, you know, and sometimes quite often we'd be coming home at 11 o'clock at night after a concert and get home at sort of close to midnight and things. I just didn't like doing all that driving by myself, you know, and I didn't want to stay in Wellington because, you know, my husband and the cat and everything we're in Martinborough.
And
you
this
know.
is home.
Yeah, exactly. I like living over here. So I thought I'm going to try leaving the orchestra and just doing a bit of freelance bass playing and then just seeing what I can do over this side of the hill. Yeah. So I've always liked the idea of choirs, even though I'm not really a singer, you know, I'm learning to be. So I started the Martinborough Community Choir in 2012, towards the end of the year that I left the orchestra. And that's still going strong. We're into about our 6th year.
Great.
Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, I do some song leading for the Parkinson's Choir, Sparking Songsters in Greytown. Yeah, and you do too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. And last year I tried, I spent a year tutoring for Star Jam, which is a fabulous organisation, and it's for differently abled, differently abled kids and their families, you know, and they hadn't been in the Wairarapa before. I think I'm not sure if they started in Auckland or Christchurch, but there was Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland, but not Wairarapa, you know.
Okay.
And so that was sort of a pilot thing. And they actually approached me, and I thought, look, I don't know if I'm too old for this, and you know, I don't know what it involves. And so I did it for a year, and I absolutely loved the kids, and I loved the philosophy of Star Jam, which is letting the kids shine. What is the philosophy? The great thing would be, I said I'd lead a singing group, but some of the kids can't really sing, you know, they're such different abilities, you know, such different...
So you find their ability.
And but for me, it wasn't really leading a singing group, it was trying to find out what each of these kids could do best, and sometimes it was dancing, and sometimes it's rhythmic things, and so it was... There were 2 fantastic volunteers helping me, but those kids had so much energy. You know, I was absolutely knackered.
I bet you were.
Yeah. And they liked things like Justin Bieber. Yeah. And, you know, we had this thing every week called Spot the Talent. So for the last 20 minutes or so, sometimes even, it got to be longer because then they all wanted to be in Spot the Talent. So... they would say what song they wanted, and they would dance or they would sing, and everybody would watch and give positive feedback to those kids. And it was amazing seeing them, some of them just, their language improved over the months, because some of them began singing a bit louder, they and then they all wanted to do it, you know. But it was music that, you know, I'm not really into Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift.
Well, who is?
Well, no. If you're a kid, and you know,
absolutely, but
they loved it.
Stage in our
but
lives.
I just thought this is a little bit too hard for me. You know, I'm a pensioner now. I'm thinking, maybe if I was 30 years old, I'd be better at doing this, because I'd just go home absolutely knackered.
Yeah. Well, also
much as I loved it, you know.
You have to think of yourself too, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think we're the same. We've reached that age too, where we do what we are happy doing. Yeah. And we want to go home thinking, I'm glad I've done that. Yeah. So. Well,
it was funny because I'd go home happy, but I'd go home so tired, and I'd go there quite nervous. You know, I'd always be quite nervous because I just never knew who was going to turn up and what was going to happen, and anyway, so but I really admire Star Jam. I think it's a great thing, and I hope if there are people listening who have differently abled kids that they find out about it and send the kids along.
So where would they find, who would they contact?
Oh, look, I know, I'm sure there are organisations, because quite a few of the kids were Down syndrome. You know, I don't think any of the families need to say what disability or, you know, whatever. I think you just get in touch with Star Jam and
Yes.
they say, this is
Yeah.
when the workshops start and this
Yeah.
is where it'll be, and turn up, you
So
know.
just Google Star Jam and
Yeah.
you'll get the info.
Yeah, and I got my tutors' T-shirt, and the kids all get their Star Jam T-shirts, and they have fantastic things. They have like a disco halfway through the year, and then an end-of-year
Yeah.
concert,
Yeah.
and all the jammers from all over the area come together, and
Oh, wow.
it's fabulous. And
Yeah.
our little group gets up, and we did a kapahaka thing and another song and stuff, and it was good fun, but just I'm too old. but another thing I do is a little bit of private teaching. I
Yes, I was going to ask you
teach
about
the
that.
cello, and I was teaching the double bass, but there aren't many bass players around, and the fantastic student I had last year is just going to Victoria University to study the bass this year now.
That's a feather in your cap. isn't
Well,
it? Yeah.
he did the practice, you know.
But good Lord, you did
Yeah.
But he was great, so I was very happy to be able to teach him. And I teach a few piano students, but I've got this thing where I really only want to teach people who practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though I was pretty lazy when I was a kid, you know. And I
Practice.
get that it's not the thing that everybody wants to do.
No.
It's really nice for the teacher and for the parents if they're not wasting money. You
Of
know,
course,
if the kids
yeah.
come along
And
and
practice
actually
makes
do some of
perfect.
the stuff you've asked them to do from last week, instead of just sort of forgetting where their music is and hiding their notebook because you've asked them to do things. I'm sort of over that. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's me at the moment.
Yeah, but so you, as you say, you are doing some private lessons. How do people reach you?
Oh, well,
If you
I
want
don't
them
suppose
to.
I...
If you want them to.
Yeah. Do I give you my email address?
Yes, of course.
Okay. vicbjones@gmail.com. That's VICBJONES @gmail.com.
There you go.
Yeah.
So if
There you go,
anybody's
folks.
anybody listening out there that wants some tuition,
Cello, bass,
cello,
or
bass or
piano, and is prepared to do some practice, please give me a call.
Yes,
Yes.
But they have to come to Martinborough.
Right.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
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 But I also do a little bit of volunteer stuff at the homework club next door, which the local church has a homework club, and kids from Martinborough School come there after school.
Oh,
You know, it's like
okay.
they have a breakfast club
Yeah.
and then the homework club. And so I think it's only Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and my husband teaches little recorder groups.
Okay.
And a friend and I teach little mini piano lessons to the kids.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
tremendous.
And that's great. And we have a
Yeah.
little concert at the end of the year and
Right.
stuff. So that
Yeah.
sort of stuff
You're
as well.
still having a lot of fun with
So
your
you are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm still, and I want to, I practice. I want to play the bass still a bit, just for fun,
Yeah.
and the cello. And I play in a little amateur string quartet, the Martinborough String Quartet.
Okay.
So, and if people want us to play at weddings or any of that stuff, yeah,
And,
ask me
and
about
you
that
help
too.
also with the music. There's a music festival, isn't there?
Oh,
in
the Martinborough Music Festival.
Yes.
Thanks for reminding me, Val. Our third one, it's at the end of September, and it's a fantastic chamber music festival. So small groups, and I'm very pleased to say that Michael Houston is coming back. He came
wow.
2 years ago
Yes.
at our first one, and he's going to come back again.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so and that'll be in the new refurbished Martinborough Town Hall, the new Waihinga Centre.
They're going to do.
Yeah, and that's a lovely hall, so that's going to be great.
Yeah.
They're going to start off with a comic opera, aren't they?
The comic opera.
Oh, yeah, 9th of February.
Yeah, Don
Yeah.
Pasquale.
That's
Are
right.
you going to be performing in
No,
that?
I'm going to go and listen to that.
What are they doing for music for that? The orchestra for
They
that?
will have. They are just going to have Bruce Greenfield, a fantastic pianist who's a friend of ours actually, and the brains behind it is Georgia Jameson Ems, who's the daughter of Margaret Tate Jameson and Garrick Ems, and she's an opera singer who. Her parents live in Featherston. I'm not sure where Georgia lives, but she's doing a tour.
Okay.
It's called the Wanderlust Opera
The
Company, I
Wanderlust,
think.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
And I know that they're in Martinborough on around the 9th of Feb, so I
Yes.
must book a ticket.
Saturday and Sunday it is. I think I've got it here.
Yeah,
Saturday and
that's
Sunday.
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, because
that would be
the
wonderful.
pianist is going to stay with us because he's a good friend, so
Oh, right.
that's how I know about it.
So we'll just go. Have we got time to just go back? We just because we live in the Wairarapa and we love it so much, and we are from Welly. When did you come over the Wairarapa? When did you decide that this is where you wanted to be?
Well, it was 1995, and we'd been over for a little, just a holiday weekend or whatever, and we really liked it. And we came over looking for a little cheap, in those days you could get a cheap house in Martinborough, for sort of 5 figures, just a little batch type thing. And when we came over to look, the real estate agent, Vicky Eckford, hello Vicky Eckford, she said, I'll just show you what you can get for a little bit more than twice as much as you want to pay, just so you can see, So she walked us into our house, and it's a huge house. It would have cost a fortune in Wellington. It was the old doctor's house in Martinborough, and it's just a wonderful big old house. Yeah. And the people before us had done a fair amount to zhuzh it up. It's not sort of home and garden, but it's nice, and we just really loved it. It's got high ceilings, big music room, so Ed could play his horn down one end and I could play my bass down the other end, and we wouldn't even hear each other. So it was perfect for us.
Perfect.
And then we thought, well, actually, do we want to just come here on the weekends? No, we want to live here.
I think that's what happens, isn't it? That is what happens.
But our jobs in the orchestra, luckily we both worked at the same place. We're in Wellington. So we managed to sell our house, which was in Lyell Bay, for the price that our new house plus a little flat in Wellington cost. So that's what we did.
So that's what you did.
We upsized or something, so we could park our car in Wellington. We could stay there if we had a few drinks or whatever, and we'd go there for lunch. So we were very lucky, actually.
Yeah. Once again. Right
place,
right
I've had a lucky. I've been lucky, haven't I?
You have.
Yeah.
You certainly have.
Yeah.
And appreciated too. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, but thanks.
Appreciated. Yeah.
Of course, you
wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming in,
My
Vicky.
pleasure.
We really appreciate it, and we've learned so much. This is why we do this, because we learn much
I've
from
learned
people.
A heck of a lot today.
We love it.
Oh, thanks, Rob.
Absolutely love it.
Nice talking to you too.
All right. Is there anything that we've missed or we've forgotten to ask? That
One question that we haven't asked, Vicky.
Yeah.
What's the strangest location that the orchestra played in?
Oh, now I was going to look up the actual location, but I do remember when we went to Hamilton once, we ended up, I don't know whether the Founders Theatre, which was actually pretty crummy anyway, I shouldn't say that, but the acoustics were bad. That wasn't available, maybe it was, I don't know. But anyway, we played at something like the AMP Showgrounds, and I remember it was like they'd put this big marquee thing up, so we were playing basically inside a giant tent, like they have for weddings and stuff like that. And it was cold because the orchestra tours in winter, and they had those great big sort of jet engine heating things, turbo.
Oh, right.
Those great big things.
Yeah, big fan heating.
Yeah, with a sort of all orange and noisy.
Yeah, noisy.
And we were playing a Mahler symphony or something with Franz Paul Decker, who was this old German fantastic conductor that used to come to the orchestra regularly.
Thinking, where the hell
And
am
he
I?
didn't know what the hell was going on. And I think we ended up having to turn them off and just have a cold concert because, classical music, it gets very, very quiet and very, very loud.
Yes.
And in the very, very quiet bits in the rehearsal, you couldn't hear us at all. We were just like, we might as well be miming. So that was pretty funny.
Oh.
So a tent in the AMP yard.
That was really bizarre.
So from the Hamilton from the ridiculous to the sublime, where was your favourite venue?
Oh, I loved going to the Concertgebouw, or however you pronounce it, in Amsterdam. That was a wonderful hall. The Musikverein in Vienna, because of all the history, was a wonderful hall. But, I love the Auckland Town Hall. I love the Wellington Town Hall, which we haven't been able to play in for years because of earthquake stuff. Dunedin Town Hall is a fabulous hall, but it's huge. I think and Dunedin's a smaller city, so often the audience, the hall's a bit big, really, in a way. But those three, Auckland, Dunedin and Wellington Town Halls, I just love that big wooden shoebox thing.
Right.
The acoustics for an orchestra are fantastic.
Yeah.
The Michael Fowler Centre's okay.
Yeah.
I never think that the basses, when I go out and listen, if I'm, in in the audience or whatever for something, I just never think the acoustics are anywhere near as good as, say, the Auckland Town Hall or the Wellington. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Oh.
To me,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
just
Well, you would
because
know.
we like the resonant, the sort of, you know,
Yeah.
because your bass is sort of going into the floor and you
Yeah.
want it to,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
be nice and resonant. And
My introduction to classical music really was the Beethoven Hall in Bonn.
oh yeah,
Yeah, we went there
fantastic.
as a teenager.
Yeah.
Mike and I were just there on holiday listening to these German street bands, and I don't know how we finished up with tickets to the Beethoven.
yeah,
We did.
it's great.
We were
Yeah.
seriously underdressed as we walked in.
You would be.
Look, you know, I don't personally. I know that my colleagues in the orchestra, former colleagues, nobody cares what the audience wears.
now.
No,
they don't.
Absolutely
no,
not.
They don't.
You know.
This
It
was
used,
in
it used to be an
1950s.
event. It was always
yeah.
an event to go out. If
Yeah.
you were going to a classical concert, you dressed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
but
know that
today it's different.
Well, people who sit in the posh seats, you know, the circle, the front rows of the circle, and that very often people wear sort of dinner jackets
Yeah.
and get all shushed up and dressed up. But then you find people in sort of jeans and boots, you know, down the bottom with,
was
you
us.
know, sort of
Yeah.
yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
t-shirts. Nobody cares.
there for the
You're there for the
music.
music, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surrounded by white shirts and bow
Yeah,
ties.
but you
Yeah.
are there for the music. At the end of the day, that's
We
what
did
it's
have
all
to
about.
get dressed. You know, the orchestra does
Yeah.
have to get dressed up,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah.
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 In fact, I've got a set of tails which I used to like wearing sometimes.
Oh, right.
That was the old feminist coming
Yeah,
out in me,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they don't have to decide what they're going to wear, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, mostly I wore women's, you know, like black stuff.
Yeah, you have to wear black.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they didn't mind me wearing tails
That would be cool.
sometimes. Yeah,
Well,
So what
thank
if
you
they did?
again,
Yeah.
Vicky.
pleasure, Val.
Yeah.
Pleasure, Rob.
Excellent.
Been
All
a
right.
pleasure. Thank you very much, Vicky.
So we're going to play a piece of music now, and then we're going to come back with what's on around the area for the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm going to play a piece of music by the Melbourne Ska Orchestra, believe it or not, and loosely based on the Liberty Bell by De Souza, which you might
John
recognise.
John Philip Sousa, is that his name?
That's the fella.
Yes.
Yeah, 1868, 1860.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very famous.
Yeah.
So here
Okay.
we go. I'll just do that.
Welcoming the new recruit, Private Ilson. And he'll be taking the lead on this part. Have you been practicing, Ilson?
Oh, yes, sir.
Right, 2, 3, 4. Whoa, howdy, soldier. Ilson, have you been practicing?
Most definitely, sir.
Are you sure about that, Ilson?
Oh, absolutely, sir.
Deep breath, son. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
try, Ilson. Nice try. So why don't we try it next year, eh?
Oh, I'm already booked out.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, I think that's probably enough from the Melbourne Ska Orchestra for this morning. You don't want you marching around the kitchen table too much. You wear the carpet out. Now, just by the by, today is the 25th of January already. Yes, it is.
It is.
So we're already one day into the Trust House Cruise Martinborough, which is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I believe today they're in the Farrier car park until 2 p.m.
Yeah.
And then they all meander off down to Martinborough and have a high old time down there. And looking at this picture now, I've never seen so many elderly cars. I was going to say vintage, but you never know what you see down there.
We don't.
Now, just to mention, Y-Fest turns up again on Wednesday, February in fact, on Wednesday, February the 6th, which happens to be Waitangi Day, you can run yourself ragged going around all these places. But if you really want a good day out, it's the Inter-Islander Summer Festival at Taranikau, of course, with the races, and it starts at 10 a.m. Lots of family entertainment, food. I believe it's alcohol-free.
Oh, it would be.
You're not allowed to take alcohol into the race course. That's right. So that's coming up. Take her out.
Oh, there'll be a bar at the.
There is a bar.
Yes, you can buy it, but you can't take it in.
Can't take cartloads of bottles in.
No.
Spread yourself out. Now, one thing, hurry, which is a favourite, or is becoming a favourite thing of ours to promote because it's physical fitness and it's bicycles. They're doing the Pedal for Parkinson's on the 17th of February. So that starts. Oh dear, it's rolling around East Coast.
I think you've got to.
I think they start in Martinborough, but if you register through Event Finder, you'll be fine. It'll tell you where to be and when to be there. And the other thing that's coming up, which I think is a great thing for Breadcraft to do, is the Breadcraft Kids Triathlon Series, 2019. Race 1 is Monday the 18th of February, and racing begins at 5:45 p.m. So it's a triathlon, so there are 3 goes at it. Monday the 18th, Monday the 25th of February, and Monday the 4th of March. Register at WS Bank or Avanti Plus. All the events take place at Wairarapa College. And if you register online or through WBS or Avanti Plus, it's $10 for all 3 events. However, if you happen to enter on the night, it'll cost you $5 per event. So that's $15. So you save money if you pre-register. So register at... I can't see an email address. I'll find one for you for next week. But
I'm sure if they went into Hurry.
If you went into Hurry, you'll find it.
Yes.
So hurryhurry.co.nz.
HURRY.
Oh, here we go. hurryhurry.co.nz/summer of cycling hyphenated. summer-of-cycling.html. So there you go. You'll find everything you need to know and never dare to ask about the event there.
Right.
So we're just coming up to the end. So I'll find my piece of paper, because the world runs on pieces of paper, as you're well aware. And here it is down the bottom here. It's always down the bottom. So, we've had that, we've done that. Well, you've been listening to, or you've just missed, Wairarapawatch, a weekly magazine programme about the people of the Wairarapa. So from Val and I till next week, it's goodbye and good luck with whatever you're doing.
And you all have a great weekend, folks, and we'll see you next week.
We look forward to being with you next week. So we're going to do a little bit of exit. I'll play, what shall we play for Vicky? Just a touch of it, because it'll be 10:30 before it's finished. And here we go.
What are we playing now?
The Nut Rocker by Bee Bumble and the Stingers.